saying that they had seen multiple ones of those and that they had happened multiple times over the past few months while he was there.
So, again, not being an expert in UFOs, let me bring it back to reasoning and rationality and why I'm skeptical. You can have a kind of a Bayesian analysis of how we should adjust our belief in.
What does Bayesian mean?
So Bayesian refers to the formula from the Reverend Thomas Bayes from the 18th century on the optimal way to calibrate your belief to evidence. And so you've heard the expression priors, depends what your priors are. That's Bayesian reasoning.
Okay.
Namely, you start off with based on everything you know so far, everything you've already observed, what credence would you give to an idea? A scale from 0 to 1.
Right.
Then you consider if the idea is true, what are the chances that you would observe what you're observing? So you multiply those two together and you divide by how common is that evidence across the board. So a classic example would be, how do we interpret a medical test? So, let's say there's a test for cancer. We know that the base rate for the cancer is 1% of the population. The test is, not bad. It picks up 90% of the cancers that are there, but it also has a false alarm rate, so that, say, 9% of the time, it picks up a signal that is not really cancer, false positive rate, like a lot of medical tests. So if you have a positive test result, how do you interpret it in terms of the probability that the person really has cancer? And the famous finding from psychology is that we tend to, people are often not very good at it, including doctors. So in the numbers that I just gave you, most people and most doctors would say, oh, positive test result, 90% chance you have cancer. The correct answer, according to the formula of Thomas Bayes, is 9%. Why? Well, if the test picks up 90% of cancers, then, if you test positive, isn't that a death sentence? Well, no, if it's only 1% of the population that even has the cancer, most of the positives are going to be false positives. So what does this have to do with UFOs? Well, before you even look at this particular evidence, given how many claims of UFOs there have been which turned out to be bogus, namely, pretty much all of them so far, that sets a pretty low prior, so that even if you can't be certain that this is a false observation, it's an optical artifact, it's an artifact of your tracking system, it's people believing what they want to believe. Let's say you can't prove that, but still, your priors, before you even look at the quality of that evidence, would be, chances are it's going to be like all the other UFO reports, namely, we may not even be able to explain it just because we can't track down every last minute fact of that situation that took place 3 years ago. We didn't have cameras from every angle, but chances are that something that's unexplained for something that's unlikely to, based on all observations so far, is unlikely to be true, is even if the evidence was pretty good, you'd be rational not to believe it.
But isn't that biased?
Well, it is biased, but it's the right kind of bias.
It's the right kind of bias. Isn't it better when you're dealing with extraordinary and unique circumstances to look at it entirely based on the facts that are at hand?
So Bayes' theorem would say no.
But what about things like what we were talking about before the podcast started, when we were doing our little COVID tests? Mm-hmm. We were talking about the Hobbit Man from the island of Flores.